Hey everyone, welcome to Lesson 5 of Caregiver University. In this lesson, we're going to discuss Personal Protective Equipment, or PPE. PPE is designed to protect individuals from exposure to infectious materials. When we use PPE correctly, it protects us from exposure. However, when we use it incorrectly, we can actually spread the germs and make ourselves or others sick. To make sure that we use PPE effectively, it's important that we first understand how germs are commonly spread. The first way that we spread germs is by touching our eyes, nose, or mouth without washing our hands first. This is bringing infectious material directly into contact with the parts of our body that give germs an entryway. Germs are also spread when we touch a contaminated surface and then touch other common objects or our faces. Blowing our nose, coughing, or sneezing, and then touching common objects or another person's hand is another way that we spread germs. And finally, when we're preparing or eating food or drink and we don't wash our hands first, we're potentially spreading germs. Fortunately, washing your hands is one of the best ways to prevent the spread of germs. Having good hand hygiene is very important for people who work in the healthcare field. The steps of hand washing start by turning on the faucet and wetting your hands. Next, you'll apply soap and rub your hands together to create a lather. Then you'll scrub your hands for at least 20 seconds. One way to make sure that you're doing this for long enough is to sing happy birthday. At this point when you're scrubbing, you want to make sure that you're reaching all parts of your hands. This includes your palms, the back of your hands, between your fingers, under your fingernails, and even your wrists. Once this is complete, you'll rinse all the soap off with water. Then you'll turn off the faucet and dry your hands. These steps can also be followed when using hand sanitizer. You'll just eliminate the parts with water. Here's a handout with more detailed steps of how to wash your hands. And there's also a section down here for how to use hand sanitizer efficiently. You can access this handout in the resources section on the Caregiver University website. So now that we know more about germs and one way that we can prevent the spread of germs, we'll move into the types of personal protective equipment. These are the types of PPE that you may be likely to use. They are gowns, masks, goggles, face shields, and gloves. Gloves are the most common type of PPE, and they're worn to protect your hands. There are a few simple rules to remember when using gloves. The first rule is that you want to try to minimize touch contamination. Touch contamination happens when you're wearing gloves and you've touched an infectious material, and then you touch another surface with the dirty gloves. Even though your hands may be protected inside the gloves, you still want to avoid touching other surfaces and spreading the material to where someone else could come in contact with it. So when you're wearing gloves, you want to avoid touching your skin, clothing, clean surfaces, and objects in high traffic areas. This may be things like doorknobs, light switches, or anything in an area where a lot of people may come in contact with it. Next, you want to remember to change your gloves often. You will always change your gloves after working with the consumer. However, if your gloves become torn or heavily soiled while working with that consumer, you want to change them immediately and not wait until you're finished with the task. Finally, you want to be sure that you dispose of the gloves appropriately. Most gloves are disposable, so you never want to wash or reuse them. When you're finished using the gloves, you want to dispose of them in the trash can or wherever your facility requires you to. The next type of PPE that we will discuss are masks. They are designed to protect your nose and mouth. When wearing a mask, it should completely cover your nose and mouth and be snug against your face. There should not be any large openings or gaps off to the side. This can allow fluids or other material to go around the mask, defeating the purpose of the mask altogether. So when we're wearing your mask, make sure it covers the nose and mouth at all times and is as snug to your face as possible. Next, we'll talk about face shields. A face shield is intended to protect an individual's entire face, including their eyes, nose, and mouth. It should extend from above the forehead to below the chin and wrap around the sides to cover those parts of your face. Next, we'll talk about gowns, and these are worn to protect your clothing from contaminated materials. Goggles are worn to protect your eyes from infectious particles. It's not very common that we use goggles, but I just want to note that they are different than regular glasses because they fit snugly against your face. And if you wear prescription glasses, your goggles should go completely over your prescription glasses so that they're still snug against your face. There is a specific order that you should follow when putting on or taking off PPE. This is to minimize your contact with contaminated or infectious materials. So when putting on PPE, you'll first put on your gown, then your mask, then your goggles or face shield, and then your gloves. Now, if you're not using all of these types, you'll still go in order with the types of PPE that you are using. So if you were just using a gown and gloves, you would still put the gown on first and then the gloves. When taking off PPE, you want to go in the exact opposite order. You'll first take off your gloves, then your goggles or face shield, then the mask or respirator, and then your gown. When working with consumers, you must follow these guidelines when PPE is required. So first, you need to put on all of your PPE before interacting with the consumer. Next, you want to always perform hand hygiene before and after interacting with the consumer. So even though you're wearing gloves, you still want to wash or sanitize your hands before and after putting on or taking off the gloves. Next is that you want to always throw away disposable PPE right when you're finished working with the consumer. Don't walk out of the room or the area and continue wearing the PPE because then there's a risk of you transferring the infectious material or contaminating other areas. Finally, never remove your mask or respirator until you are at least 6 feet away from the consumer or other people. Finally, when you're removing your PPE, it's also important to identify which areas of the PPE are contaminated and which are clean. Most of the time, the outside of the equipment is contaminated and the inside is clean. So while you're removing, you want to avoid touching the contaminated surfaces by removing the equipment from the inside out. This is the completion of Lesson 5. If you could please move on to the next slide and take the quiz.